Polly, let me ask you now about your book. Your books, including the Neptune Project, are hugely successful. So how did you decide to highlight science? You mentioned your interest in climate change. Were there any other factors when you decided, as you mentioned, not having a specific science background? How did you come to decide to highlight science in your fiction? And what advice do you have for young writers in the audience?
All right. So actually, I really needed to make money. That was also, I think that's a fair reason to embark on things, on projects. But no, I just was so frustrated, having cared a lot about the environment my whole life, and then realizing my own children were not learning about climate change. They weren't getting taught it in school. Kids didn't seem to be kind of dialogue about it. It's like, how can I change that? How individually can you make a difference? And so once I came up with the concept for the book, I just went all in on it. And I'm really glad I did, because now people download my teacher guides, and I go to schools and they think they're getting an author, and they do get an author, but I have 4 or 5 slides in my PowerPoint about the greenhouse effect, because it's still not really, climate change is not being discussed in our country. It's not being discussed in the schools. It's not getting the attention I would like to see it have. And so, yeah, I dialed that up in the books, and I'm really glad I did. And in fact, the new project I'm working on is a climate disaster book for high schoolers. I want to give teachers in high school a platform to discuss these issues. So fiction can be a way. Look at your gifts. Look at what you can do. If there's something you care about, maybe you can change the world in some little small way. I've got a lot of kids talking about marine biology and the oceans and about climate change. And again, it was through fiction, which is maybe not the way you mostly think about going at something, but it worked for me, and it's been really rewarding. Oh, and then my advice to writers. I'm sorry, 2 parts. Keep this one quick. You need to read. Every time you read a book, you're expanding your vocabulary, and words are the building blocks of our stories. So your big job in 7th, 8th, 9th grade is to read if you want to become a writer. You also want to keep a journal. Keep on writing, because you get better at stuff when you practice. And then my final thing is I always say unplug. And I know even in COVID, I know that your phone and your computer are your connection to your friends. But I hope every day you at least unplug for half an hour and let your minds drift. You might call it zoning out and spacing out. I call it daydreaming. We do not value daydreaming enough. We've talked about how science can be creative. If you guys don't keep practicing your daydreaming, which is when new ideas pop into your head, we're not going to have new equations or the cure for cancer. So scientists and writers, we all need to daydream.
Mamta, you're on the front line battling COVID. It's on all of our minds, obviously. Tell us a little bit. I know you could probably spend a long time talking about this, but just to give us a sense here, what has life been like for you personally and professionally since March of this year?
My life has changed dramatically. I volunteered to take on a couple of the COVID trials in March because I at that time really had the skill sets to be able to do that. I was an infectious disease doctor. I knew how to do clinical trials, and so I volunteered to do that. Thinking that this was like a 6-week thing, 9-12 weeks, and now it's 9 months and we're still going. I've pivoted my entire career from what I used to do into doing COVID, and it does take a toll, but I think what's rewarding is that in some small way, I hope that we are doing something that is helping patients improve. We are definitely in some way, whether our trials work or don't work, we are contributing to knowledge. That is very important, because to end this pandemic, we have to get better science. We have to understand the disease, we have to understand the therapeutics, and we have to get better treatments. And that's only going to be done through, doing these types of trials. So, sometimes you're called on to do a lot of work. I mean, I often spend 12 hours a day doing work, but that's what is required at this time.
Function. We have a parent who's asking, what should we focus on instilling in our daughter during these middle school years? Wonder if anyone has any thoughts on that on the panel.
I think just being curious, reading and being curious about what you're hearing, and really wanting to understand not just what's being said, but what's the basis for that. I think that critical thinking is what we should really try to be developing. What are the facts? And learning to be able to make a opinion based on facts.
Wonderful. And I think that, again, you know, every child is different, but so much of it is, unfortunately, there's this sort of single story for a lot of students and their parents and teachers, meaning the story of science is relegated to the story that's told to them in the classroom. And that may work for some people, but not everybody. So I think as a parent, what you can also do is open it up. Like every story, there's multiple stories. So maybe the curriculum that year is all about rocks, and maybe your daughter is not that into rocks. Does that mean that it ends there? No, of course not. You know, the beautiful thing about science is you don't have to be an expert, as Mamta said, and as we all are saying. Ask questions and try and find out some answers, and you know, and kind of convey that, you know, there's a lot you can actually address and answer without a ton of specialized equipment, just through some basic research, some looking around.